You're listening to the Mangroves to Mountains podcast, where we talk all things outdoors: hunting, fishing, paddling, camping, adventure travel, and more.
Steve Kantner, how are you, sir?
Steve Kantner as well. How are you?
Doing well. We've talked a bit lately on the phone, but I haven't seen you in years.
It's been a while.
Looking good.
True. Thanks. Yeah, better than I could be expected under the circumstances.
Yeah. Strange times we're living in, but yeah. I think we met. Well, I had, even before I moved to Florida in 2002, but I had read some of your work in, I think, Fly Rod and Reel, and I was intrigued by fishing the trail, and so invited.
That was the best synergy between, the classic view of fly fishing and imitation. Everything had to be exact. You were ready for it from the get-go, but that was the perfect amalgam of what people, let's say in the Northeast, the orifice people thought fly fishing ought to be and what it really was. It was great. That made me as a fly fisherman.
And for people who don't know, Steve is known as the land captain, among other things.
Other things.
But,
Depending where you go, the girls used to write stuff in red lipstick on, on their bathroom mirrors. When I wake up in the morning.
Yeah.
When I had girls, when they had bathrooms.
When they had two bathrooms.
Thanks for asking me that. Good question. Thanks for asking me that.
Yeah. So, and then I was going to say, when did you start? Where did you start fishing? Not when, but where? I assume you started young.
I'll tell you the whole story, and I haven't told us for a long time. When I was a kid, I was pretty cracked with a spinning rod, and we learned to fish on this local fishing pier in Lauderdale by the sea. It didn't have any of this Lake Worth Pier stuff. We didn't have African pompanos or bonitas or kingfish, or not enough of them to make a difference. But we had excellent tarpon fishing. And when I first started doing it, I had a Centaur Pacific reel. We all did. And those reels back in the day would hold about 150 yards. Back then, I forget which was the first popular monofilament. It was Mason's. It was a West German monofilament. It would hold about 150 yards at 12 pound. And that was it. And we had this little short pier. And if that fish got ahead of you and you didn't know how to use vectors and how to pull him sideways or whatever, one way or the other, and get him something you hooked over here to run over here, you couldn't reel him in. No boat, no chance to follow him. I mean, it was, it was Super Bowl, and it was always 4th and 12. And that's how I learned. And I'm very fortunate. The guy he's long since deceased, that the pier was named after, Anglin and the Anglin family. He was the equivalent, and there's still a few guys alive who remember him. He was the Sugar Ray Leonard of fishing, spin fishing. His hands were so fast. This also lent well if he ever got in disagreements, which we had back then. We didn't have them with guns, the old-fashioned way.
Sure.
And he was, you couldn't even see his hands move. We designed tackle that was different. He taught me, like, for example, we didn't use these big long spinning rods. We would always use like a 7.5 foot spinning rod with 20-pound test, and it really had some guts. But what we used to do is we would always shave the butts off at the end of our elbow and put those good crutch tips on there. So nothing would ever, when you passed this across in front of your body, it would never catch.
I see.
And you had complete mobility in front of you. And all you did is you worried while you were thinking, you worried about the lower half of your body and where your feet were going. Mm-hmm. And you'd be surprised what you can do. I mean, compared to a boat, of course, can run ahead of the fish or running up to the surface by going in a, whatever.
And then what size
I learned
fish?
the hard way.
What size fish were those? Was it a big tarpon?
Oh God, I'll tell you. By the time I was, and I hate to use the first personal pronoun here, but by the time I graduated college, I had caught probably close to between 50 and 100 tarpon from 50 to 75 pounds anyway. The 100 pounders, I had caught a couple of them. And I think a lot of that was when I either graduated college or whatever, but we were nose hooking a live pilchard and throwing it out. And later we learned to, of course, we use plugs for them. I say we, there weren't 10 people on the pier back then in the evening when these things would come by. And ultimately, when I really got into the fly fishing, I had and still have a couple of rods with shooting heads on there, floating shooting heads. And I learned to throw a fly. You would see one coming down the reef, like 130 pounder, and you'd throw to them and they'd get on there. And I remember back then, I had the first quadrant reel I had was I had a Finor wedding cake, but after that I had a Jurassic anti-reverse. I still have the reel up here. And I mean, they'd go and go and go and go. And I mean, it'd be 300 yards of line and this thing would be greyhounding into, Never Land, and we'd reel them up. We never beached one, but I came pretty close.
Wow.
And then after that, of course, I got a boat and I fished out here in the ship channel. We actually caught them then, a lot of them.
Mm-hmm. Very cool.
There was nothing to it then, in deep water. It's like catching an amberjack.
And so many more fish, I assume, back then, right?
Oh yeah, I mean it was. Let's be honest. I mean we're probably the greatest deterrent nowadays is I would say a shrinking resource. I would say a practically non-existent resource. When I write nowadays, I mostly write nostalgia and I write fiction because fiction gives me a chance to write all this nasty shit about some of these people who allowed the resource to plummet into the nadir that it has subsequently. All the politicians, all the dipshit editors, the ones who were, you get it. The ones who fishing's great, come on down, but make sure to bring your liniment.
Yeah.
And this beautiful resource falls in the dumper. I mean, what do we have here? We have some fun and rock and roll. I mean, that's not, there's not much left. And when they have to close the beach because of sewage spills, there's something wrong here.
Oh God. Yeah. I mean,
like which part of this didn't we figure out when this didn't go overnight. It started going this way.
And now it seems like it's just accelerated in the last 10 years to the
last 2 years, 3 years.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I've got somebody that's going to come over here actually and test the water out here behind. I live on a river. I mean, South Middle. River. People won't go in it. They won't swim in it. We're going to have it water tested and stuff. Somebody said, wait a minute, my internet connection is unstable. I think what it's probably doing is it's saying that I'm unstable, which at least there is probably some
×2
arguable proof of that.
No, it's working now. There was a little bit of a glitch there, but it's working. We got most of that. So yeah. It's kind of sad what's happened. Very sad, really. Even in the 20 years that I've lived in South Florida, I've noticed, and like you said, exceptional downturn in the quality of the water and the fishery in the last 2-3 years. It's really sad.
Yeah, and the thing about it is that the one thing we have today that we didn't have before, today we have a couple of these, how should I say, well-heeled scientists or citizen scientists who really understand the biology, who they've already made all the money they ever need to make in their life. And now the rest of it, they're doing it for the gipper, for the love of the game. And they are really speaking out about this. And of course, there are all these organizations, a couple of come to mind, and we have this massive lobby, this quote conservation lobby here in South Florida. And man, I can't swear to everything because I don't have. It's very hard to get this, to actually get records of what goes on, but I'm under the impression that every Monday morning there is a shot caller who speaks to all these organizations at 9 o'clock Monday morning. And when you approach any of these guys, I don't want to name the organizations because I don't want to go through one of these, Pirates of the Caribbean defamation suits, but the information is out there for each and one of your listeners to look at. I don't want to get people to say what I say. I want them to do their own research.
Yep.
But it's some of this stuff. It's like whenever you hear him talk, you got to look at this asshole who does the original thing and watch if his Adam's apple moving, or their Adam's apples move when these people talk.
God, really?
Yeah. It's real scary. And sooner or later, one of these publishers, well, there are very few of them left, or somebody is going to hear me speak. And of course, I'll get one of these, we can't accept any of your work anymore. Like, who cares?
Yeah. Yeah, it's a challenging time for sure. Let's hope something happens that turns it around. I don't want to get into politics too much. But
no, I get you. But I mean, for the good of the resource, this is neither left or right. I understand what you're saying.
No, I was just going to say that. I was just, sorry to interrupt. I was just going to say, like, with the governor actually seems to care and actually has devoted some money to it, to the restoration of the Everglades. So let's hope.
We're all knocking on wood. Yeah, this guy seems to. I mean, there's been a lot of lip service in the past, but like I say, I'm trying to avoid any kind of political commentary. But I can't help reflecting on what Elon Musk said about who are you going to vote for? 2 words: Ron DeSantis.
Yes, I heard that. Yep. So the land captain thing, when did that start? Just switching gears here a little bit.
I'm trying to think. When I first came back from the service, I got a job working for an old line legal reserve life insurance company, Life of Virginia. And I don't mind saying it, the people were just wonderful. Some of them had worked for that company through 3 generations. But it was a job, how do they say this, that I was not suited for by training, education, or experience. I was not a business major. And I think I caught a case of telephonitis because I used to go at night. And, this is when I'm first married, and I'm making cold calls. And I just didn't have the heart to disturb people while they were eating their dinner. But the company was a wonderful company, and they introduced a lot of good products. I bought 2 of them we still have in this house, but after a while, this isn't what I do when I'm not forging ahead. And I wanted to do something that I thought I could do. And I remember I was sitting in the office one day and it finally reached critical mass. And I drove home. I'd never been to a print shop before, but I sat with a guy and I made out a card that's Steve Kantner's Custom Concepts for Fishing. I didn't know what the concept was. And John Donnell had given me an old 12-foot fiberglass canoe that the side was kicked in. And I learned to do a fiberglass repair. And the first day I had it working, I actually had a charter. I think I charged $150 back in. Took him out in the Everglades. Didn't know which end of the canoe to get in. We swamped it. We ended up catching a bunch of fish. The guys were laughing their butts off. I had 3 of us in a 12-footer, and that was it.
Oh my God.
And and then and the deal about the trail. Now I remember going. Jody Moore took me the first time over there, and Jody Moore and Andy Deere, and there's all this, bashing and thrashing going on. And, I'm using what I thought were standard flies, and I didn't realize about the necessity, to imitate those Gambusia minnows and to have the fly push a wake. And I didn't do nothing. Anyway, I came home. I don't remember what I did. I probably got real drunk and swore at my wife or something. And that nothing inspires me more than failure.
Yeah.
And I mean, I didn't know how, when I started writing, not that it's any good, but it's better than it once was. And all I'd ever written before was a business letter. Who knew? Hemingway once said, somebody asked him, what can you attribute to? He said, well, to a not inconsiderable amount of talent. I mean, in other words, he knew how to punctuate a sentence a little bit, and a burning desire and an unhappy childhood. And I had never really thought about it, but there you go, ka-ching. And I remember I used to get these, what do you call it, would fire me for having a this or writing for another company or having a radio show and stuff like that. It's all communication. I don't care if it's email or what you're doing here. The podcast arguably is the wave of the future, or what it is. There's a difference between idiomatic, nuanced writing, obviously, and that's why I'm trying to perfect that. And take 2 churns of chenille and call me in the morning stuff, or doing these profiles like I did before. You know what profiling 50 women was like? Okay,
I'm afraid to answer that.
Have you ever had a sister?
I'm sure it was a joy.
No, have you ever had a sister? It's like giving yourself one.
Oh my
I mean, there were some of the wonderful ladies,
right.
And I get it. And I've lived through a major change in consciousness. My wife is, I don't want to call her a liber, but she's worked her whole life, even though she didn't have to. And when I first started, some of these ladies really prevailed against insurmountable odds, where they just couldn't get to the top of the heap. I've got a story in this new book all about it, called Cat Lady. And, we see all these babes with their kid, everything else, and it's like, what gives here? And the reality is these women are the winners. They prevailed against, glass ceilings and all this kind of stuff. Sometimes when they retire, and of course, 20 years, some of them are in their 40s, and they find that cats are easier to get along with than people. And I cite some of the reasons for it, but anyway, this girl gets involved in civic activity and she ends up doing a major saving the world. It's a long story, but writing fiction is wondrous because you get to do that. And if Amber Heard wants to sue me, she has to come here and hand me the, papers in person.
Yeah, the Pirates of the Caribbean.
Reference
you made earlier. It took a minute, but I got it.
Yeah, no. I mean, it's increasable. Listen, I have to tell you this. This one lady that I do Facebook stuff with, she sent me things. Now we're talking the 4th of July. It celebrates the independence of our country. That cost millions of lives to have what we have here.
Yeah.
And somebody writes on there with this new stuff in this Roe versus Wade. I'm like,
oh my God.
Choice. Yeah. I mean, you do it. I don't think a guy ought to control, how much do I have to do? Do I have to open a vein to prove it to you? But this woman said, I think we ought to cancel 4th of July. There's not enough independence. Signed, women.
Oh my God.
I need
to just finish this drink on that line.
Yeah.
I mean, Lord, that's just awful. Yeah. Did you hear in Arizona, a certain party has an F the 4th thing in protest of the decision, sending Roe v. Wade, or sending back to the states from the federal government. F the 4th. Like, really? I mean. These people, like you said earlier, like these people died, thousands of people died to enable us to have what we have today in America.
Yeah. The women thing, when I wrote that, Tom Parra, the publisher, called me and he said, you live right down east from Bothell, Washington. He said, you live down the street from the IGFA. I said, I do. He said, some of these girls? I said, I do. He says, do you think any of them would talk to you about it? And this was the same year or right around the same time that the U.S. ladies soccer team scored that unprecedented first international win.
Mhm.
And I mean, and there were other sports, and of course, Muhammad Ali's was his daughter, that wonderful lady boxer, and women were really equal or superior to men in many, many ways. And I thought, man, we're ready for this. I mean, it never made any difference to me about the only thing about, I mean, there is a polarity. I mean, generally men are more larger, more muscular. I mean, if somebody, like my wife wants somebody to take out the garbage back when I was a little more hale, that was my job. Or to jack up a thing and change a tire, that was me. But there were things that a woman could do using her noggin that were probably way ahead of me. And there was all this, and like, I never cared. I took females fishing on occasion. I mean, when they booked me. And in fact, the general, as I recall, the point of the generalized perception of it was girls, Vicky told me not to use the word chicks, but I was younger then. They're great because they actually listen to the guide,
Yeah.
assuming that the guide, they wouldn't hire the guide, except the guide knows more about them than they do. Like when you go to a sommelier in a restaurant and, I'm going to have, Tornadoes, Bernays, whatever. What would you recommend as a wine?
Right.
It's just a recommendation. You use your fly if that's what you want to do, but let's just until you get a little fish snot on your hands, use mine. Just in the beginning, let the guide, and then you go do what you want to do. And I don't care if you want to do handstands after that, but don't come crying to me when it doesn't work.
Get the skunk off the boat first, and then
yeah.
See where it goes.
Oh, I had the pleasure, the privilege of taking some really, really great female anglers fishing. I don't mind mentioning her name. That one girl is married to the guy who's the sage designer, that Diana Rudolph.
Oh, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Oh, God, she can throw a loop so tight you can put it in a mouse's ear.
Wow.
And she's really good. And she's funny. I hadn't seen her in years, and she came running up to me. The first story, she says, Dave, how are you doing? And she'd had a bad patch. She'd had a kid. She had a little depression afterwards. And she remembered, she said, you remember that story about the Panther? Yes. And you and I talked about that. I was with Sue Cocking, formerly of the Miami Herald, a great outdoor writer.
Yep.
And we were out, we were fishing that levee on the edge of Broward, Palm Beach County. And we're looking, and I was taking the canoe up, putting it in water, putting it back or whatever. And here, off about 200 yards down the way, there's this big female panther. And cats can't see real well up close, but they can see real good off in the distance. And this cat, I don't know if it smelled my cologne or what it was. She was directly downwind from me, but here she comes.
Wow.
I mean, ba-dum. And I said, Sue, and I pushed her. She fell on the ground. I kicked her in the ass. She got back in my old Honda. And that thing, the thing on the side of a trailway where that the hound is stretched out?
Yeah.
That thing came flying up the bank at about 800 miles an hour. And fortunately, I was back far enough and I covered myself up. I put my hands like this, like a linebacker, and the cat couldn't see it to make the impact and twisted in midair. I mean, if that was me, my vertebrae would have popped out and hit the ground and ran off back into the sod farm. I had to walk off in back of the car for 200 yards and drop my pants. I thought I'd crap myself.
No one could blame you. It's unbelievable.
No, that was.
I've never heard that before.
Snakes and bison and moose and everything out west and stuff, but it was so fast and so bad.
Yeah, I've seen 3 panthers in the glades in the times fishing out there, but none of them approached me. They're always either walking away or just like in the distance. But that's amazing.
A bunch of them actually.
Yeah, really cool.
Of course, awesome. we the state employs guys who've never seen one. The panther darters and stuff. Yeah. My
incredible.
attitude is, if you don't carry a gun or wear a uniform, they have to fire these employees.
I remember one of the stories you wrote about, it might have been Fly Rod and Reel, or I'm not sure. You've written for a lot of publications, but the one where the guy hooks just fishing along the trail. So for those of you that don't know, we're fishing at times on the trail very close to the road. So the road is like 6 feet behind, not even, like just feet from your back cast, from your fly rod, not even just your back cast. And then you hooked one of your clients, or did you hook a passing vehicle?
Oh, it would happen all the time. You know where that one little bridge is, where the wire goes actually across from that one little island, about a mile north of 2992 Junction?
Yeah.
It was a set, in a way, it was, pardon me, a high school principal who had a kid who was really good in shop class, and dad and son, it was a nice relationship. They made this wonderful custom made this fly rod with a U20 silver, what do you call it, a reel seat and stuff with a rosewood insert, all kinds of fancy gobbledygook in there and everything else. And I said, watch out. And I told him, I said, now listen, you just wait another 15 minutes and the tide was dropping and the snook corral is going to start popping, okay? But oh no, they couldn't sit still, and they were throwing, and the Mayan sickness, madness, or whatever. And all of a sudden, this beautiful rod, custom rod they made, and they hang this car, and it takes off, and they had, I remember it was an anti-reverse, what am I going to say, cup spool. You would know what kind of reel, really expensive.
Yeah, I know what you mean.
Yeah, and the thing takes off and the reel flies out and it's overrunning itself, and the reel that is holding the rod, it's going up and down between the stripper guy and the guy like that, and sooner the thing overruns and it backlashes, and it's not funny. And it breaks the backing. It breaks the 20-pound backing, but not before it skyrockets the reel against the stripper guide with so much force that it rips the first two guides off, takes the tip of the rod off, and the reel this parabolic arc. It goes like 100 feet in the air, this aircraft grade aluminum reel, and lands on the road. And it's absolutely slammed shut. And it's hissing and, with the oil coming out of it and stuff. As I remember the term I used, frozen in a rictus of molten grease. A rictus, somebody's death look or whatever, and it's laying on the road and it's hissing and it's moving all by itself, even though it's not attached to something. I go, oh my God. But I feel so bad for those folks, and particularly with all the work they put into it.
Yeah.
But don't always listen to the guide. If he says, wait 5 minutes, go have a cigarette, go smoke a joint, do whatever.
Take a leak. Yeah.
Take a leak. Yeah.
Classic.
That was it's the worst thing I ever saw, and I wrote that somewhere. I was just so ashamed of myself. But I've had all kinds of stuff. I have one in this book where they go out on the trail and they have custom made. They have a manufacturer makes at their plant makes this, and these guys, where they have the, and I spared you the scarf around the neck crap tonight.
Oh,
yeah, none of that, or the hat or any of that stuff.
Right.
I wouldn't. And they had all that, with the scare shirts and the vented, all this kind of stuff from out west. And I couldn't understand why it wouldn't, and you know better than I do that we're entertainers. I mean, the idea is not shoving something down somebody's throat. You're there to help them have a good time.
Yeah, that's what it's about.
Hopefully on their own. You just want to help them do it. But and finally, I'm trying to keep my mouth shut. And finally, after about a half an hour, and time's a waste, and I said to one of them, I said, would you mind if I just tried this for a second? And I get it out there. But by this time in my life, I knew how to lift with that really tight flick back gear. And I could really get a point on it. And particularly in the absence of wind, I could make a 60-foot back cast, that was tight, that wasn't flying all over the place. Pinch that forward, one of those little, and it started going out. And I did it 2 or 3 times, and I'm trying to analyze real quick what could be the matter. And this is about the time that my eyesight started going bullshit. And I couldn't figure it out for a second. I said, you got one chance at the brass ring, or these guys are going to think they wasted a lot of money. Because by this time, I wasn't cheap. If you wanted to dance with me, it cost.
Okay, we're good.
Okay. And it finally hit me. I felt this, I felt it. And man, I had to come up with something real quick. Whoever had filled this reel had wound, not the backing and stuff for the wrong hand, they had wound the line on, they had done this and put the nail nut on the wrong end. And it was a running line. They had a 10-weight rod, on a 10-weight line, the running line's about a 4.
Right.
And, it's 60 grains or whatever per foot, whereas a 10 is 210 grains. And I had to, I said, come on, help me. And we got that thing on the ground, and I did a quickie, the knot to the backing, and a quickie nail knot, and all that nail nut stuff. I mean, I don't, there's a couple of, you get a good loop, a turtle knot will go once, around and a half, through, boom, tight. It's as tight as, you can't tie your shoes that tight, and trim it. Let's go fishing. And from there on out, boy, they were good casters. And see, that's the thing. I watched their hands while they were casting, and this wasn't Chinese arithmetic to them. They understood how to do it.
Yeah.
And that's what I couldn't get. And I thought, oh man, be it one with Einstein, be it one with Immanuel Kant. And I got it. And I don't recall if, I'm sure I received a significant honorarium for that. And they got their fins pricked, or their hands pricked by a lot of fins that day. Mm-hmm. It was pretty cool. And they had to throw far. I mean, they and it, like the old guy used to say on that thing. They made it the old-fashioned way. That was very satisfying to me. That, and 2 trips in particular. There was another time I took a blind guy fishing. And his daughter called me, and he was I don't want to give him up, but he was a head of a major department in an Ivy League college. And his wife or somebody was reading him my stories, and she called me on the phone. They lived over in Fort Myers. She said, he's coming down here. Do you think you could do anything with him? And I mean, this was just bravado or something like that. This is, like, where would you take Jennifer Aniston on a date? I said, yeah, I'll do it. And I did it. And don't ask me what the hell's the matter with me, but we ended up, and he couldn't see nothing, but he really knew how to fish. And he had, as I recall, he had a split cane fly rod, and he, which has, as you know, a different rhythm, and he really knew how to do it. And I'd get him to extend the line. I found him a place where there was plenty of clearance on this side where he could, or first of all, I could walk under the water, get him across the what do you call it, the aluminum siding, and walk him down there. And he could make that shot. And when he did, I'd say, Mr. Whatever, strip out a handful, okay. And I'd turn just a couple, move your foot in, left foot out, and do the hokey pokey. And I got it, pardon me, where he was landing at, 45 degrees downstream, cross stream, right up next to the apron there. Tip in the water, start now, here he comes. When I tell you, now strip hard. I had him put the tip in the water, and it'd be on there. He caught 8 snook up to about 8 pounds, and he landed a freaking tarpon.
Whoa.
And his daughter came to get us, and I used to always carry this, and I don't think I did it so much, certainly, I mean, about alcohol or whatever when you're fishing, but sometimes these people wouldn't, one beer is a good, replenishment of salts. And, at the end of the day, if you've done well, there ought to be a reward. So I'd have a bunch of waters in that. We drank beer, and I met his wife or his daughter there at the welcome station, and I hope that stayed with him the rest of his life. He's older now. He might probably doing better than I am.
Hey, Steve, I got to pause it there for a second.
Say when.